All right.
Hey everybody, I got John Lieurance. Did I pronounce Lieurance?
Lieurance.
Lieurance, okay. I got John Lieurance. He's a chiropractic physician, registered medical assistant, performs musculoskeletal with the use of ultrasound. So he's just a genius practitioner, but he specializes in very chronic conditions, specializes in using a form of medicine that most doctors don't even consider. And you guys are in for a treat because we're gonna really literally get to the bottom of things today, as we talked about earlier. So, John, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Reagan. I mean, what a beautiful place you have up here in the mountains, and the weather's beautiful. Last time I was here, we were snowed in.
Oh yeah, crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're here in the summer up in Park City. I invited Dr. Lieurance to my house, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. We've been excited about this for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we've got some exciting information we're going to share with you. John, you've dealt with your own Lyme, mold exposure, your own chronic illnesses. And so a lot of the insights that you're going to provide today are directly reflective of you and your own internal journey. And you've used the knowledge of how you've helped heal yourself with your patients. But maybe you could just give us an overview about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up in Hawaii, and I had a blessed childhood.
Oh, brah.
Yeah, bro. A lot of surfing, very clean living, and I moved to Florida when my parents got divorced, and then eventually went to chiropractic school and then naturopathic school as well, and have been practicing in Florida in Sarasota for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And about 12, 13 years ago, I got very sick, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was frustrating because I had one of those practices where I had a lot of people coming from, all over the country, and I was supposed to be the specialist, but I was sick.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help myself.
Right.
And, that type of situation lends itself to a lot of emotional stress, on top of the physical illness and not knowing what it was. And I went to a number of practitioners, and I was diagnosed with a variety of different ailments, and nobody really got the right diagnosis until I tested myself for Lyme. I did what's called an IGeneX test,
Yeah.
which is a fairly expensive test for Lyme. And then I followed that up with the more traditional Western blot, which was also positive.
Oh, even the Western blot was positive.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I was really sick. I weighed, I went from weighing about 190. I was doing a lot of bodybuilding at the time. Very low body fat, just in peak shape, to weighing like 150.
Wow.
A lot of people thought I was strung out on heroin or something, because, when you're sick like that, you look, it turned out that I had mold illness as well. And, when you look at some of those accumulation of those biotoxins in the body and the neurotoxins, you get very angry, you get depressed, you're irritable, you're not good with relationships, you get very alienated. And when you don't know what's wrong with you, you don't have an explanation. People are like, how you feeling?
Right.
What's going on with you? And you can't say, well, I have cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer. People are like, oh, I sympathize with that.
Right.
You're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel bad. And so that's another frustrating, angle with it. And so I noticed that I started to do some IV infusions early on, still not knowing what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And it was really helping. I was doing these slow colloidal silver IVs. I was doing vitamin C IVs and glutathione pushes, and the glutathione was really helping.
Yeah.
But my veins were starting to break down on me, so it was more difficult for me to get infusions. So I had to start exploring other routes of, getting glutathione into my body. And I did a lot of research and was able to discover that, glutathione is not available orally.
Yeah.
And so early on, I started to experiment with some suppositories, and I looked into the science and the physiological aspect of suppositories, where the absorption with these suppositories rectally is through this venous structure that goes directly into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
where if you take things orally, even if they are absorbed, there's a first pass to the liver, they're broken down, and, very poor absorption to begin with. And then what you're left with is, metabolized by the liver. So it doesn't have the impact, And so when you're sick, you need something that really gives you a punch. And that's where, the infusions were really moving the needle for me. So I started to, I had some glutathione suppositories compounded by a compounding pharmacy, and was like, wow, this stuff really works. So I started producing my own, around that time, and started a company called Glutathione.com. And we started shipping and producing glutathione suppositories, which we've had that company now for about 12 years. And, in the last couple of years, we've started to really innovate, with some formulas. We sent you some samples.
Oh yeah, well. I love them. Yeah.
So
great. And so the biggest breakthrough for you is you saw, okay, you can only do IVs for so long, especially if some of you are listeners. I mean, they're struggling with these chronic diseases, mold toxicity, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr virus, thyroid issues. We have a lot of our patients who have breast plant illnesses. And so if you look at that and you say, yeah, you can't, like glutathione, you can't do an IV every day. Even the liposomal based glutathione, in your research, you found that it's just not well absorbed, and it's the structure, it's an antioxidant, it's very fragile. And so once it gets exposure to the environment, it's on a stopwatch, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so with the suppository, this is a way that people can get glutathione very effectively into their system. And maybe you could let's talk about what glutathione is and how it can actually, help benefit people. Maybe we start there.
Yeah, so it's a sulfur helix, and it's a phase of detox that our body has naturally. The liver, in a healthy individual, the liver produces endogenous glutathione. And so, your body produces this naturally, and it's something that has been shown to decline in a lot of disease profiles, especially Parkinson's, a lot of degenerative neurologic disorders, and a lot of autoimmune, chronic inflammatory type of conditions, low glutathione. But glutathione is interesting because it does a few things. One is it's a very positive impact on the viral status. So it's got some immune boosting aspects for viral infections. It's very necessary to detox all the man-made chemicals, pesticides, and biotoxins. So for anybody that's suffering from mold illness or Lyme, this is a real game changer, because there's not a lot of molecules that will actually bind those neurotoxic biotoxins and carry them out of the body. So it acts like flypaper. It wraps around these toxins, and then it chaperones it out of the body.
So when you say biotoxin, are you meaning like maybe some of the off gases from bacteria dying, or yeast? What are you referring to?
Yeah, all the above. So a lot of bacteria and viruses and chronic infections will accumulate biotoxins, which are fat soluble. They're very difficult for the body to excrete, and they accumulate primarily in the cell membrane. And so, we had been talking about this a little earlier about how, I think genetically, some people are more prone to have poor detox pathways. And so they'll accumulate these biotoxins in their cell membrane. And what happens is you have environmental stressors or input, and it's basically transcribed on the cell membrane, and then the messages goes into the cell, and then it can be expressed in a variety of different ways. And so when you have a lot of, it would be like the Earth. I think about the Earth, right? And I think about like if you had all this space junk, circling. And so you have somebody trying to get to Earth, but they're like on their way to Earth, and they got to avoid all these different, satellites and so forth. Well, it's similar with your cell. Is there's different proteins and messengers, peptides that are trying to create a positive or a negative change, what have you. And when you have a lot of that space junk, my analogy.
It's a great analogy, actually.
You skew those messages, so then you have this inflammatory response. The big challenge with cleaning that up is that the cell membranes turn over every 2 years. That's a long time.
Right.
So someone that's suffering from chronic illness, if they're not handling that component, they're never going to really get better. You know, they're going to be one of those people that they may get better temporarily, but it just keeps relapsing.
Yeah.
But if you're really looking at this as a long-term strategy, you know, you've got some myopic aspects of these where you want to look and say, okay, I'm doing antimicrobials, I want to clear parasites, I want to avoid food sensitivities, and fasting, activate autophagy, you know, all the things that I think are starting to become more obvious to a lot of practitioners that are keeping up with some of the more contemporary ideas. But the long term, the 30-mile viewpoint is we've got to clear these biotoxins from the cell membranes, and glutathione is it's a good thing to have in the toolbox.
Yeah, and that's the most powerful antioxidant that your makes. I mean, it's right there, and so if you think about it, if your cell can't, if they've got all this biofilm, the same way, if our planet is completely polluted, and someone's trying to communicate from the outside world, now you take the earth and you multiply that by 300 trillion or however many cells we've got. If those cells can't communicate, then that's where our body starts to break down and function. Chronic diseases show up. And if you have an infection like Lyme or a viral infection, there's no way our immune system can target it, because your immune cells are cells in and of themselves. They have a membrane too.
Yeah, and so do your mitochondria.
Yeah, exactly.
They have their own membrane. So there's, you know, deficits of being able to produce energy because of this. You know, the toxins actually get in the cell membrane of the mitochondria.
And in the mitochondria in the cells, how many mitochondria structures are there in the cell on average?
Well, I will tell you this: 30% of your body weight is mitochondria.
Yeah,
that's how many mitochondria you have. It's hundreds of billions of mitochondria.
Right. And do you buy into the theory that mitochondria, sorry to go on a tangent here, everybody, but do you buy into the theory that mitochondria are the single cells bacteria that, you know, basically evolved into a mitochondria so they could get housed in the cell?
I mean, I can't think of another way that happened. I mean, it sounds reasonable to me.
Because the mitochondria are their own
intelligence. It's like a symbiotic relationship between a primitive bacteria that got incorporated into the human cell.
Right.
And we're able to produce energy much more efficiently.
Yeah.
That method, yeah.
And now we've got, and their non-evolved species are still residing in our guts and our skin and everywhere else. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating to see how the body works. So what you're saying, just to summarize, I'll give you guys, we'll break it down into very simple terms, is if you don't have glutathione in your body, glutathione is naturally there to clean up the mess. And it's there to help your cells communicate. It's like keeping your cells connected to Wi-Fi, to use kind of a modern day technology term. When glutathione is not present, that's where all the biotoxins and garbage starts to build up. The cells can't communicate, and then disease kicks in. You said an inflammatory response, and any chronic inflammatory response is going to drive the body down. So does that summarize it?
Yeah. I mean, when you get a chronic inflammatory state, very often it's just an overload of toxic burden. And so, you know, if you had, say, your house and you don't have the energy to keep it clean, take out the trash, clean out the refrigerator, you know, it's going to accumulate a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not a very efficient, you know, you've got a very clean, organized house here. So you can be very productive here.
Yeah, exactly. But if we just had, if you walked into the house and you're like, well, there's garbage over here and, you know, things are rotting over there, like, it's not going to be a healthy environment. And that's essentially what's going on in people's bodies. I look at that. You mentioned Parkinson's with glutathione, you know, just getting the nasal spray, which you also carry a nasal spray, glutathione. Glutaquick, just getting that into the brain can just pop people out of a lot of the Parkinson's symptoms. And there's been a lot of research that shows that anyone with Parkinson's has a diminishing amount of glutathione in the brain. Yeah,
one of the inventions that I created early on when I did last farm glutathione called glutagenesis, and it has some key ingredients incorporated with it. And we didn't really dive into yet. Within chiropractic, I don't do a lot of traditional chiropractic these days. I'm more specialized in the neurological field.
Yeah.
So I would be what would be considered a chiropractic neurologist.
Yeah.
So most of the patients that I see when I'm working in that capacity are Parkinson's, vertigo, Meniere's, a lot of inner ear conditions,
Right.
Alzheimer's, post-stroke, a lot of degenerative neurologic disorders and such. And so what I was looking for is, because the way that the functional neurology and the technique that I use called functional cranial release, where we do some specific cranial adjustments, but then we follow it with specific exercises promoting neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
So we're trying to target, like for instance, if I was working with a patient with Parkinson's, we would be looking at different eye and head strategies or body strategies to try and wake up those dopaminergic cells.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that with activation. If you look at like neuron theory 101, the nerves need fuel and activation.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are missing that activation component, because you see a lot of practitioners giving them, their antioxidants, and they're kind of working the oxygen,
loading them up with the internal. Yeah.
But, unfortunately, a lot of these people have a metabolic ceiling. So you try to work them from this capacity with functional neurology, and you're trying to drive those pathways through exercise, and you're hitting the ceiling. You see them crash, and you'll see that the pupils start to, do this, what's called hippus, and then the people's eyes really start watering, and you can just tell, okay, you hit the wall with this case.
Yeah.
And so that's a rate limiting situation for my work. And in a situation where we just fly in and they're giving up a week or 2 weeks and they're staying with me, in Sarasota. So it's like I had to do something to raise that ceiling.
Yeah.
And so that's where the nebulized glutathione, glutagenesis, the GlutaQuick, a lot of these products, came into place, where we would have them do this nebulized glutathione, and then we would do the exercises, and we would be able to go twice as long.
Oh, really? So you noticed something just right away.
Right away.
And have you been using any regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy with your Parkinson's patients lately?
We have a device that I'm incredibly excited about. It's called a CVAC.
Yeah.
Which stands for Cyclic Variation and Adaptive Conditioning.
Yeah.
And there's only 55 in the world, and we have one at our clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big challenges with a lot of brain-based conditions, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, you look at Alzheimer's, right? Beta amyloid plaque. For those of you that might be watching this, they're kind of starting to get lost with some of our technical jargon here. There's proteins that accumulate in the brain that are really more linked to immune function. And so some people are more able, or they're built so that they can handle an infection at the cost of activating all of these proteins. So if they had an infection that occurred in their central nervous system, they've got the apparatus to like bind it, and the amyloid beta wraps around either the toxins or the bacteria, the virus, and that's your immune response to keep it from spreading.
Right.
And so they used to think, oh man, these amyloid, we got to get them out. That's like, this is a problem.
That's that. Yeah. We always thought that's the issue. That's the cause.
But so there's a strategy that your body uses that's using what's called the glymphatic system. Now, a lot of people, may have heard of the lymphatic system. If you haven't, it's the body's gutter system.
Right.
The glymphatic system is the gutter system in the central nervous system.
Yeah.
Hasn't been known for very long. It's a relatively new discovery of mankind. But the interesting aspect of the glymphatic system is that it's activated very powerfully when you're in deep sleep. This is a big trigger. Melatonin is a big trigger for this. And so we were looking around for strategies where we could supercharge this glymphatic, because if we can activate that, we're able to clear out a lot of these toxins in the central nervous system. And so back to the CVAC, right? it looks like something out of a space movie, right? It's like a
yeah,
pod.
I gotta see this. Yeah.
You get in, and it kind of looks like a spaceship that Mort might have gotten into, an egg. And so you get in it, and it basically changes the pressure. So it's actually hypoxic.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be as if
you're without oxygen.
Yeah, it's lower oxygen levels.
Okay.
So it would be as if you were like 22,000 feet,
yeah.
and it could immediately drop you to sea level.
Okay.
Now, I wouldn't do this initially because when you first start using the CVAC, the rate limiting aspect of it is the inner ear. So
mm-hmm.
your ear, their ability to clear, like when you're flying,
yeah.
So you have to whatever strategies you use to open and clear your ears, you've got to definitely use a lot of those strategies when you're in the CVAC. And so there's like a basic protocol that you start patients out with, and you kind of work them up a little bit. But it's just absolutely a game changer for the central nervous system in particular. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that I think athletes can benefit from it. General biohackers,
mm-hmm.
People that might have Lyme disease or mold illness. But I'm especially excited about using this CVAC with a lot of my stroke patients and degenerative neurologic patients, MS patients, yeah. Alzheimer's, in conjunction with infusions of exosomes.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're doing a combination of 10-pass hyperbaric ozone.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that, and that's really upregulating a lot of mitochondrial function, which is important for mm-hmm. these cases.
Yeah.
And then we're using some light therapy on the blood.
Mm-hmm.
We call Lumistem.
Yeah.
And then we're using various intravenous applications like phosphatidylcholine, glutathione, vitamin C. And then I know this is starting to sound complicated, but like it's a protocol, right?
Right.
We talked about Neuromax, which is another intranasal product that has a peptide called Cmax.
Yeah.
And what Cmax does is it super ramps up BDNF,
right,
which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Yeah.
So we do all of those, and then we put people in the pod, and the pod is moving this stuff deeply into the brain tissue.
Nice.
And, we got a lot of patients in wheelchairs, so we're picking them up and we're putting them in the pod, and, just the results are unbelievable.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
This protocol.
Yeah. So John is innovative. You guys haven't been able to tell by now because not many people are practicing medicine this way. And that's one of the things that I've always looked for. Is like, what are the bigger innovations? How can we go a little farther? So, safety profile on this.
It's ambient air.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's regulated as an exercise device, completely FDA approved.
Okay. Great.
I mean, if you can fly, you can get in it.
Yeah.
So it mimics the effects of exercise because it changes in pressure.
Yeah.
And so they actually did some studies on how it activates stem cell production, radically improves stem cell production endogenously by sitting in there.
Yeah.
VO2 max is increased significantly as if you were doing some, and that, I mean, think about that for someone that's in a wheelchair.
Yeah, you increase their VO2 max again.
And it's 2.5 times stronger in its effect to improve oxygen absorption than erythropoietin without having an increase in hematocrit. So there's just, it's like an entourage effect by this one device.
Wow. And especially with what you're using when they go in there. So Cmax is a peptide I've used for quite a while. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love it for our patients who've had like traumatic brain injuries, strokes, or MS patients, Parkinson's. It turns their brain on.
Yeah. I've created a product with the Cmax in combination with some terpenes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like next level.
Like CBD terpenes, or where you get
the plant terpenes.
Plant terpenes, okay.
And terpenes are in all plants.
Yeah.
So there's certainly a huge family of terpenes that are also very high in a lot of cannabis, plants, which are of particular interest to me.
Yeah. You got maybe we could segue into that just a little bit. And let's talk a little bit about some of the CBD? Because you've got, so for those of you who are like, well, I've tried taking things orally, I've looked for the best CBD, and one of the things John would love to create, and someday we'll have a version of this that we can actually use in the form of CBD, but it just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to bypass that limitation, you created a suppository CBD.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well,
because I did try it the other night, and I slept like, I think on my Aura Ring, I was almost 3 hours of deep sleep.
That's amazing.
My REM was about an hour and 20 minutes. And I remember I woke up and I was like, did I even sleep last night? It was one of those where it's like, sleep, wake up.
So sleep is one of the most important factors that I like to address with my patients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for anybody that's looking to achieve, vitality and long life and happiness, if you can get your sleep dialed in, you've got a good of enjoying that. So as far as CBD, I'm probably in the family of most people where they've tried it and they weren't sure whether they really felt anything or not. It's like, maybe I felt a little bit. And, what I've found is that CBD is not very well absorbed orally, and that's why so many people are like, oh, use the spectrum and all the family of cannabinoids, which is true. But the gut breaks it down. You got first pass to the liver, just like we talked earlier in the podcast. These factors minimize what you have available after all those things happen. So what I've done is I've created a product which is actually, if you look at a lot of the suppository preparations that I have, a lot of them have pure hemp and CBD ice in them.
So I'm gonna show everyone one of these, and if you're listening on the podcast, you can't even see. We're doing show and tell. It's like, this is like the best school. So this is the hempository.
Yeah.
And so using this,
so that's got about 40 milligrams CBD and hemp extract.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know why this thing's beeping. I'm just going to assume that we're good.
Okay. So the hempository, 40 milligrams doesn't sound like that much, right?
Well, the average dosage is actually 25 milligrams orally.
Yeah. And medicinally, we'll go up to like 90, 120 for patients who have some, pretty significant conditions.
Yeah.
But that's because we understand that a lot of it is not getting broken down, especially if someone doesn't have good biosecretion, they can't emulsify it. It's a fatty acid. So what can this do for somebody?
Well, I would say hempositories, maybe it could be a good product for someone that's really dealing with some chronic illness, but I would probably more look towards the Neurodial, which is another product, a very large dose of CBD in it. It's about 150 milligrams or so.
Okay. Great. It's not in this.
It's in there somewhere.
There it is. Neurodial.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the more potent version of it.
So these products, they have technology in them that is very unique.
Uh-huh.
So we have a relatively small operation. We're not looking to scale and be a major suppository manufacturer. So we keep and maintain very high quality. We source, like for instance, our hemp is sourced from an organic farmer in the Big Island of Hawaii, up in a high altitude, and he's growing these plants out of the volcanic soil, and he's growing plants that are raised to have very high CBD levels and virtually no THC.
Yeah.
And so we take those plants and we create extracts, and then we also add isolate, CBD isolate 99%. So we've got kind of the best of both worlds, where we've got the whole family of cannabinoids, which has been shown clinically to really assist in the utilization and absorption of the CBD. And then we've added terpenes specific to assist in, CBD utilization. And then they have their own effect of mood elevation, improving anxiety, decreasing inflammation. So CBD's got a lot, it's got a lot of press as far as having all these great effects, but the terpenes have, as good or just as good of effects. So we've combined both of those into this suppository, and we've also improved the suppository with a probiotic, where we've developed certain strains of bacteria that are actually helpful in assisting the utilization and the breakdown, the micro breakdown of these substances, and then a slow release technology with a polysaccharide. So it's able to slow release over a long period of time. We had kind of talked a little bit early about, why would you go with a suppository versus an IV?
Right.
Well, with CBD, you don't have a choice. There's not an injectable CBD.
Nothing. Yeah.
Right? But my feelings are you get the exact same effect with a suppository that you have with an injection. However, you're going to get the slow release aspect of it. So let's say that you had some beans that you wanted to soak, right? And you got the beans and they're dry, and you pour some water in there and you leave, and an hour later you come back and you're like, okay, right? And you pull a bean out. It's hard, right? How much water did it absorb? So there's a rate that bean absorb the water. So if you think about your cells the same way, you get an IV, you have this huge bolus. What they call is peak plasma. So this is like the highest level that the substance gets in the blood. So it goes up and then it goes down. So when you do an injection or an IV, you get this spike and it comes down. Where when you use a suppository, even in general, not even with the slow release technology that I have, but just in general, a suppository is going to give you a few hours. So that would be similar to letting that water and those beans soak for a longer period of time. So let's say that you had a cup of beans and you had like a quart of water, right? And you're like, okay, well, how much water did it absorb? Well, would it matter if you had a quart of water or like, 10 gallons of water?
It's just putting more water in there doesn't change it.
It's the length of time that it soaks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. And so that's what these are. And I've noticed every strain that I've looked at has the probiotic, or every product that you've got. And so if we look at the Sandman is your deep sleep. So the best thing about Sandman, is it the glutathione? Is it the hemp complex? Is it the combination?
So, I think that most healthcare practitioners have a very limited understanding and appreciation of melatonin.
The melatonin's the big thing there.
Well, it's the combination, but melatonin is, it's poorly understood by a lot of practitioners. I mean, most practitioners look at it as a model for seasonal affective disorder, or helping people go to sleep. But actually, melatonin's got a lot of uses. I mean, it's the Mac Daddy antioxidant that's in your body. I mean, melatonin is what's protecting almost every cell of your body. It's been shown in animal studies to stop cancer in its tracks.
Really? Wow.
When you start looking at the benefits of melatonin, if you do your own research, which I would recommend anybody. I actually did a talk that I filmed on YouTube, and you could probably find it, on my website or on YouTube if you search Advanced Lyme Core. It's relatively long and it gets a bit technical, but if you want to take a deep dive into melatonin, check out that video. But we'll try to break it down into some simple terms.
We'll put a link on the show notes for you guys too.
Okay. So melatonin actually will help repair your gut. It protects you from cancer. It's a primary antioxidant, and it also assists in you having sleep. So if it's able to, what we're talking about with Sandman is not a small dose of melatonin, and it's also given in a way that you're going to get a very high absorption. So if you take melatonin orally, studies show that you're only going to absorb 15% of it.
15%, even if you've got healthy digestion.
Yeah. That's the, I'm not sure exactly how what subpopulation they were testing, but that's, that's out in the literature.
Got it.
So it's very minimal regardless, you might vary a little bit. So many people I talk to, when I start talking about melatonin, I tried that, didn't really feel a difference. The absorption component could be it, the dosage could be the issue. But the key takeaways is, melatonin has not been found to be toxic at any level. They've given it to animals that would be correlated to an average female or male, about 150 pounds, and it would be equal to 10,000 milligrams of melatonin, and still no negative effect.
No toxicity.
Mm-hmm. So it's not, and it also doesn't create a negative feedback loop. So in order, like in other words, like if you take testosterone, right, or most hormones, you're going to shut down your own production because your body's saying, hey, I've got this. I don't need to make my own. Yeah. So then when you take away that exogenous hormone, then you're depleted.
Right.
So this is the big conversation that we have with our patients, because we're trying to activate, your own production or save it or keep it going. Where melatonin doesn't have that.
Really? So your pineal gland, which produces your melatonin, it actually does not, there's no negative feedback. So it will keep producing melatonin as you need it. So this is like just an extra boost that doesn't have any long-term consequences that you've seen.
No. So when I was introduced to this idea, it was at a big conference. Somebody presented in Orlando a couple of years ago, and it was a brain regeneration. I'm actually sitting right next to Joe Mercola, and we're listening to this, and this presenter was talking about melatonin and his experience in his practice, and he said, this is the most exciting thing with my chronic patients that I've actually seen really move the needle. And he was even using up to 2,000 milligrams.
Wow.
For patients.
And so how much is in Sandman? How much?
200 milligrams.
200 milligrams. And did you call it Sandman based on the Metallica song, Enter Sandman? Can you sing that for us in case people are trying to go to sleep right now? Hush, little baby.
You're embarrassing.
I like the name.
You know what? Edit the music.
Let's put in some Metallica.
Some headbang.
Yeah. We'll get some wigs going for you guys. Well, this is powerful. So one of my big concerns about melatonin is just your body builds up a tolerance. And so your pineal gland just goes to sleep. And then, I get worried about disrupting the circadian rhythms, because if your body's not producing melatonin on its own, cortisol gets out of control. Mm-hmm. And so from the research you've done, and I appreciate this insight, it's not impacting that.
Well,
circadian cycle.
It's incredibly neuroprotective. Mm-hmm. So like, for instance, if you had an Alzheimer's or Parkinson's patient, and obviously these statements you have to take with a grain of salt, because this is just my opinion. Okay. Yeah. And from what I've looked through the research, it seems to me that you have the potential, by taking these high physiological doses of melatonin, where you may not decline at least as rapidly, because you're actually going to be protecting those nerves with that high level of melatonin. Right. So I think the two biggest categories that could benefit from it, I think a lot of people could. I actually take Sandman every night myself, mm-hmm. and it's really made a difference for me.
Yeah.
But it's the people with degenerative neurologic disorders, anybody that might have chronic Lyme or mold illness, because that's, especially if it's gone neurologic for them, mm-hmm. this can be very, very helpful for them. And then the cancer patients.
Yeah.
I personally, I feel sad that melatonin is not part of our protocol in our hospitals, mm-hmm. because the more you look at it, you're like, holy moly, why isn't this being used?
Right.
And there's so many pharmaceutical companies that have done studies with molecules very similar to melatonin, because you can't patent melatonin. It's not patentable.
Yeah, it's a natural product. Yeah.
But they can't mimic the effects. They get stuff that is really close, but it doesn't do the same thing.
Yeah.
But they would love to be able to create a molecule that this would be all over the news. If they could. But when you have a molecule that's not patentable, then there's no motivation for anybody to out there promote it, advertise it, so we never hear about it.
Yeah.
You know, if you run something through phase 1, 2, 3 double-blind placebo studies, average costs about $1 billion.
Right.
You know, so a lot of these natural remedies just are never going to get to the patient. They're not going to be able to have the advantage of going through all of these studies than where our scientists and our medical community and our insurance carriers are going to say, yes, that's shown efficacy, and we can include that into our protocols.
Yeah.
It just won't happen.
No, it is really frustrating how we built up the system. About 100 years ago, we created the rules of the game, and now we're like, actually, it's serving one industry, and that's the pharmaceutical industry. So hopefully that will change over time. But in the meantime, I mean, I think CMAX would be, someone comes in, traumatic brain injury, they're doing that in Russia. It's like, use CMAX, use cerebral lysin, like
stroke. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, if you can get on top of this right away, you're going to be so much better. So there's a few other things I want to talk about, and then we got it. There's the elephant in the room somewhere. On that globe, there's an elephant.
Okay.
But the elephant in the room is, what is the proper way of using a suppository? Because I know a lot of people are like, what? I have to stick something in my butt, and that's just weird. And how do I do it? What's the best way? So maybe before we jump into the other cool things, maybe you can just walk someone through what it looks like to properly use a suppository.
Well, we have a cartoon video on our website that demonstrates it. But I do get that a lot of people at first blush will kind of be like, okay, that's not for me. And that's fine. You know, I mean, maybe you want to go and get an IV. You know, maybe you like the feeling of cold steel piercing your body, right? And that's much more enjoyable than, you know, it's inserting a suppository. So it takes, you know, 30 seconds or less than that. You do it by a sink, you wash your hands. I mean, there's not a big difference between that and, you know, using the restroom. You know, you're putting your hand down there anyway when you're using the restroom. But I think the benefits really outweigh. And once you're comfortable with the process, it's just a complete non-event.
Yeah, very simple once you're used to it. So any pro tips? I mean, how long should people hold still after they've done the suppository? Do they need to hold still? I know, like, if you're using this with kids, you know, if a kid has a high fever and you're doing the suppository, you want to make sure that they're holding still for a while, and so it doesn't just pop out. But what have you found?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't insert it far enough in, it could kind of push out, you know, and so there's the shape of the suppositories that we carry are very well shaped where it's very easy to insert, but there are some companies that manufacture them that are more difficult. But, you know, for me, I can, you know, apply a suppository and just go right away. I can go work out. In fact, you know, we were kind of talking about one of the newer, and this is in beta testing, but it actually ramps up mTOR.
Yeah.
And, you know, so many people are looking to suppress it, right? But it's about that balance. You want to have autophagy and, you know, the intermittent fasting and all that, but then you want to have a strong mTOR effect, you know, to build muscles in particular. And so, you know, there's this suppository we're kind of beta testing is called Regemtor. And this is something I've been taking before I work out, and I've got some other people I'm beta testing with, and just the athletic performance is just unbelievable. So, you know, I guess it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. For the most part, the suppository base that this is made with seems to be very non-irritating. I don't hear a lot of people complain. But at first, you might want to see how you do. I mean, lay down for maybe a minute or two while it dissolves.
Otherwise, the biggest key, and most of us, our sphincter is about at least an inch. So you got to go past the sphincter, otherwise push it out. But once you got it sort of deep enough, then it's like a vacuum. So it's gonna hold in there. So don't let this be an impediment. That's why we're having the conversation.
Yeah, stay open-minded.
Yeah,
I mean, if being healthy is your main priority, especially if you're suffering from a significant disease, you got to get over it. Or if you're looking to really take your health to a peak, there just is no way to get the effects that we're getting without going through this process. Unfortunately, the transdermal, it's just not there yet. Oral, we've already talked about the challenges with that, and IV, it's more expensive. You have the peak plasma aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting an IV is going to be about 100 times more expensive. All the material that goes with it, there's a lot of waste with it. Using a suppository makes a lot of sense. So, so let's move on. So everyone watch the video. What's your website again?
Well, it's on advancedbiomecorp.com.
Oh, so Regen for this is so
that's beta. Yes, yours.
I got a big bike ride tomorrow and Sunday.
You'll love it.
I'm gonna try this out. So that's what we just talked about there, the mTOR. And then let's talk about pain and spasm. You're telling me about the turmeric and boswellia that you've gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
You notice different because I have patients who take it orally. They're like, oh, this is amazing. But what do you notice?
Well, the big thing with curcumin is that it's very poorly absorbed. A tiny fraction of what you take orally is absorbed with curcumin. So you have the rectal absorption of curcumin.
Mm-hmm.
There's CBD, and there's boswellia, which is helpful for anti-inflammatory purposes, pain.
And so is this good?
There's also some Chinese herbs in there.
Right, you got one of my favorites, the cordialis.
Yeah, the cordialis extract is in there. But I would put this next to any prescription pain medication.
Yeah.
As far as its effect, you can take it orally, or you can take it, as it's meant to take.
And morning, night, both.
The one suppository is fairly strong. Mm-hmm. So on an average person, you're going to feel quite sedated.
Yeah.
If you've got really bad pain, if it's moderate to severe, this would be an excellent product to take for a deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you knew you were staying home and you weren't driving or whatnot, if you're looking to kind of use it for pain and be able to still function, you may want to start separating it, into quarters or halves. Just see how you react to it.
Okay, beautiful. And then the Chelate 900. So this one is this is like your heavy metal chelation.
Mm-hmm.
So what percentage of the population would you say has heavy metal toxicity?
100.
Yeah, me too. I'm just testing you. Viral infections, 100. We all have all of these things built up. So, what's the difference in using an EDTA and suppository versus doing like an IV?
Well, the studies have been very positive on EDTA, suppositories. It rivals IV.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that wants to do chelation. So chelation falls in the family of really two main, situations. One is someone that has a lot of cardiovascular atherosclerosis, and so they have plaque built up in their arteries, and they're looking to clear that out. Mm-hmm. This would be a product that would be similar to that type of protocol. So cardiovascular application. And then the other application would be someone that's doing it for detox, particularly heavy metals, man-made chemicals. Mm-hmm. So the EDTA is a chelator, so it helps to kind of break these things up. It also can be helpful for people with infection because it breaks up biofilm. So you could use this suppository in conjunction with like an antimicrobial. I'm sure you are familiar with a lot of different herbs. We use a lot of Chinese herbs, a lot of Western herbs with patients with Lyme. Yeah. We have not found antibiotics. It didn't work for me personally. I had probably 4 PICC lines, and I've done every antibiotic, and I regret it.
Yeah.
I think it did more damage than good.
Yeah. Yeah, but this would be something where if you use some of the Chinese herbs, which I'm most familiar with, there's Western herbs too, you add the TA in there, EDTA breaks up the biofilm, and then those herbs can actually help your immune system capture that infection. Yeah. Even through the blood-brain barrier, or is there an issue getting it into the brain?
No, it crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Crosses the blood-brain barrier. Phenomenal.
The EDTA is also in another product called Marcons. It's Marcons A and B. And I think this is something a lot of practitioners miss with their chronic patients.
And maybe you could explain what Marcons is. It's the antibiotic resistant staphylococcus.
Right. It's a nasty collection of bacteria that can colonize in the sinuses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you ask any drug user, what's the fastest way to the brain? It's nasal mucosa.
Oh yeah.
So if you can imagine, one of the interesting facts of these colonies is their ability to produce this really, really robust biofilm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very sticky protein, gelatinous material. And so the two aspects that I see that being problematic is, one is that it's going to act as flypaper for, like, if you're in a moldy house,
mm-hmm.
Those spores are going to just stick into the sinuses. And that's why people with chronic mold illness, if we do all the other treatment, they don't get better. You have to address this so everything works, because they're going to be constantly having their immune system activated by their bloodstream being exposed to these toxins.
Mm-hmm.
So the biofilm is something that needs to be addressed. So what we've done is we've combined two different nasal sprays, and actually worked with Dietrich Klinghardt with this formula as well.
Okay.
He was getting some good results with
out of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so one of the formulas is a probiotic, and so many people don't realize that you have colonies of beneficial bacteria in the sinuses. So one of the primary methods that many doctors use is an antibiotic spray. They call it a bag spray.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really against this spray, because, like, for instance, as gentamicin, which is ototoxic,
mm-hmm.
so risking like permanent loss to your hearing, getting tinnitus, having dizzy spells that could never go away.
Yeah.
Right? So why would you do that? And then you're also killing off, what good flora you have.
Yeah.
So what we've done is there's some terpenes that are very antimicrobial,
mm-hmm.
anti-inflammatory. We've included those. We've also put some very powerful colloidal silver and EDTA in this Marcons B. So what we're having our patients do is on the elephant.
Yeah, there it is.
What we're having our patients do is we're having them alternate day. One day they're using the probiotic, and the next day they're using the colloidal silver.
Oh, great.
So it's a really nice balance. And we've got, dozens of patients pre and post.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been tested for Marcons and you're struggling with some, whether it's inner ear conditions, so anything like in the head, cognitive, chronic inflammation, you should definitely get a nasal swab. And
mm-hmm.
what happens is a lot of people may have gotten this, or they may try to, based on listening to this podcast, but make sure it's from the deep area in your sinus. So a lot of people, I don't think, will actually push the swab as far down as it needs to go.
Yeah, and it goes deep, by the way.
Yeah. So you want to get this test done, and I'd say 80% of my chronic ill patients have this positive.
Okay.
So we almost, as soon as patients are scheduled or come in, we start them on the Marcons A and B just out of the gate.
The biggest thing they notice is some of the tinnitus might become minimal. The sinus infections, irritation of the sinuses, that diminishes. Nasal passages clear up.
Mm-hmm. When I was first developing this, it was based on me having a positive Marcons.
Okay.
I don't want to take the bag spray.
Yeah.
And there's another doctor that's, very important in my practice. He's an acupuncturist and a medical doctor. His name's Alex Smithers, extremely talented practitioner. And he tested positive for it as well. We're both like, how the heck? We must have gotten it from our patients.
Yeah.
Especially the work I do with a lot of the cranial. And we haven't really talked about the endonasal approach, but we'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah.
So we engineered this, and so my experience was, and also Dr. Alex's experience was, worse. Like I actually felt pretty gnarly the first day or two, or even week. Because if you think about it, you've got all this toxic buildup in that biofilm, and then you go and start breaking that up, and it's getting introduced.
It's going right into the
bloodstream, right into your body.
Yeah.
And so be ready if you do this, that you might feel on the other end of that. I felt incredible. Like I really felt, we both felt it. And this is something I see with my patients as well.
Wow. So you've got, I mean, there's nasal sprays, you've got the suppository. I mean, it's pretty amazing because most of the products on the market right now, even though we know there's better ways of applying medicine to the body, most of it's just oral. So this I really appreciate. So if we looked at this, I think we covered, we missed any.
The Zen pository.
Zen pository. Let's talk that and just, you know, and then we'll wrap up. But the Zen pository, this has got the GABA support. You've got the theanine in there.
Yeah. So it's really a very powerful GABA stimulator. You know, so that's the inhibitory neurotransmitter. The feel good, calm, relaxing.
Yeah.
It helps us. Each suppository actually has a significant dose, so it's a bit sedate if you take the full one. So like if somebody was having a lot of pain or they're having a lot of anxiety, and it would maybe substitute a benzo, like a Valium or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, so it would have powerful of effect, or it could be broken up into smaller individual, or a lot of patients were find it very helpful for sleep. But I really try to, you know, steer people towards the Sandman for sleep, because it's really got the full spectrum of benefit, and either the Neurodial or the Hempository during the day. You know, and we haven't really touched on the Neurodial as far as like, so CBD has an incredible neuroprotective aspect to it, right?
Right.
And when you can raise those limits so high up, there's some amazing things that happen, you know, and I found that a lot of my patients that couldn't tolerate a lot of exposure to chemicals or mold, they can when they take the Neurodial. I think I was telling you that I took one when I fly, because I'm crazy sensitive to mold, which probably all chronic Lyme patients like myself, even after you repair yourself, you know, it's something that you still continue to have to deal with. But since I've been using this really high physiological dose of CBD, I can go into a moldy place. I can fly. You know, most planes, people don't feel good because they fly.
Right.
But it's because of all the mold and the air quality.
Yeah.
You know, I'd say 90+% of that, you know.
And the EMFs are, you know, blast your nervous system. And then time zones.
But you combine EMF with mold.
Oh, it's
right?
deadly.
So that's what you get in a plane.
Got an internal neurotoxin and an external. Yeah.
Well, they've done studies showing that the virulence of mold goes way up when they're exposed to EMF.
Oh, is that right? No, I'm not surprised, but there's been studies on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So using the Neurodial, you use that when you're flying over here. What was the difference between, you fasted before you got there too? Yeah.
So my strategy for travel is fasting, exogenous ketones. I like precursor to NAD, like nicotinamide riboside.
Yeah.
So I take that, and then I did a Neurodial, and man, let me tell you, I got off the plane ready to go.
Just feeling great.
And you know, it's a different time zone. I had, you know, it was 4th of July. You know, I had a party to go to, and there was a lot of intellectual conversation. You know who I was with. I mean, there's some deep conversation going. So, you know, you had to be using all your brain function, and I was fine.
Great. Man, that's awesome. All right. Well, so people on a regular basis, so in the day, Neurodial is something people can do in the day very well. And anything else in the day? The Hempository Neurodial. What about the ABC 500? This is glutathione.
Yeah.
So you could use this in the day too.
You can, but when you start getting into the higher doses of glutathione, even the 500, it is a little bit irritating. Okay, so my experience has been do it at night in bed. You insert it right before you jump into bed, and you're fine. You're gonna maybe, we also have a 1500. So you place suppository, and it might feel like you need to do a bowel movement. And so something that we didn't talk about earlier is you might want to void your bowels before you insert it, because it could actually get you stimulated and you might lose that suppository. But the best way to do it is at night with a higher dose glutathione.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, this has been fascinating, to say the least. And many of you may need to pull out your biology book and your chemistry book, just because John threw out some wisdom for us. So best way for people to reach you?
My email is askdrjl@gmail.com. And my main website for the clinic is advancedrejuvenation.us. And then we've been talking about products from advancedbiomecorp.com. And so there's a lot of information on that site as well.
Beautiful. And so one final question for you. So if you look at all the things that you do to keep yourself healthy, what would you say the top 3 are for you to live long and healthy?
I love what I do. I'm excited to wake up and do what I do. And so, I know that that's a big challenge for a lot of people, to feel like they're in the zone and doing what they're called to do.
Yeah.
So, if anybody can get to that point, whatever you need to do, image boards, meditation, if you got to change up where you're living, what you're doing, if you're not happy, this is, I'd say, number 1 on my list.
Love it.
And, I don't eat any sugars. I don't eat any, dairy. My diet's pretty strict as far as like a lot of refined carbohydrates. I eat real food. I think that's a big, aspect of vitality and health.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the products that we talked about, I don't take all of them regularly, but I think the CBD and the terpenes and, some of the sleep remedies are game changers, absolute game changers. So if you're feeling like you want to do some experimenting and you want to try something that may really move the dial on your health and well-being, I think this would be it.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to agree. If you don't get a good night's sleep, and then it's also hard to have the energy to make correct choice of food. So it all ties in.
Well, they did a study with people with sleep. This is really interesting. They did a study and they found that people have more isolation, and that if you put 10 people that were in front of you, right?
Yeah.
And you had 5 of them that didn't get sleep, and an observer was asked which one looks friendly and that they wanted to socialize with. They were across the board, they were very compelled against these people that didn't have sleep.
Wow.
So sleep is really important for feeling social. And even if you don't feel social, you're thinking, well, nobody's really picking up on that. There's a lot of energetic aspects where when you're not getting good sleep, it's been shown scientifically that people just aren't going to like you. They're not going to want to spend time with you, which is going to make your life more miserable.
One more nail in the coffin of why we got to sleep. Yeah, that needs to be number 1. Well, this is awesome, and thanks for being such an innovator in the healthcare world. And we definitely, I want to touch base with you in the next few months. I'm going to be trying these. What I've noticed, deeper sleep, when I did the suppository, on my Aura ring, I tracked probably the longest deep sleep I've ever tracked. So I already know it's these are breakthrough.
3 hours.
It was just shy of 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible. I woke up and it was one of those time travel moments where it's wait, where am I? What time is it? And it felt really good.
I wear an Aura ring as well. And it's funny because I've got track of my sleep. And then when I started using some of this technology, it was just completely massive shift with REM and deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And just I'd say the productivity of my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel refreshed and my brain is just on.
Yeah.
That alone, what you're able to accomplish in your life and do it with robustness and enthusiasm. And that comes from a deep quality sleep.
Yep. Yep. You said it best. All right, everybody.
All right.
Well, share this, and thanks again for being on the show.
You're very welcome.
Look forward to having you on in the future. And everybody, we're going to have a special coupon code for you, so be on the lookout for that. It's in the show notes, and we'll direct you right to Dr. John. And once again, have a great day, and love you all.